What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we're going game by game, talking about different running backs I'd be starting and sitting. As always, if I don't answer a specific question, just look at the website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. We got the projections there for every single scoring format. Take the person I have projected for more points. So, we will get into the running backs in a second, but first, of course, have to start things off as usual. Stat of the day. Wednesday's stat was among wide receivers with at least 100 targets this season. Who has the lowest catch rate? The answer, DJ Moore, and I mentioned, or I guess I put on the screen in that video, it's not necessarily a wide receiver stat for that. Most of the time when you've got someone, talented enough to command that many targets through like 11, 12 games, I don't remember if the Panthers have been on bye yet. They have been on bye. They're going bye this week. So through 12 games for DJ Moore, that's a lot of targets, right? Commanding that many targets. It's not that he's bad. It's that his quarterback play has been really poor. But M. Tagger 3211, first get that right on Twitter, and then Joseph Goodry was first get that right on YouTube. I believe he's at 9 now, so one away from getting in the Hall of Fame. Today's stat. Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel are the wide receivers 1 and 2 in PPR scoring since week 7. Who ranks 3rd? All right, and that's obviously among wide receivers. So running backs. All right, first game up. Eagles at Jets. Pretty gross game. Probably not going to watch this one. This game's got a 45.5 point total. Eagles 7-point road favorites for the Eagles. Jordan Howard was a DNP on Wednesday with that same knee injury. Boston Scott did not practice as well, but that's with an illness. He'll be good to go this weekend. And then Miles Sanders was limited as we expected. And we talked about yesterday, or I guess, yesterday for me. I don't know when this video is going up. Could go up Thursday, could go up Friday. We will see. But in the Wednesday video, we talked about how it's expected Miles Sanders is going to play, but we can't really be sure on that one. It is still trending in that direction. It's trending in the direction of Howard will be out, and we'll have a combination of Boston Scott and Miles Sanders, but obviously keep looking at the practice reports on this one. If that's the case, Miles Sanders will be running back 2, Scott will be flex viable, or honestly could be used as a low end 2. The Eagles have the 3rd lowest pass rate over expectation. They're a very, very run-heavy football team now after starting the season very pass-heavy. The Jets have allowed by far the most schedule-adjusted fantasy points to opposing running backs. This is just a smash spot. Any running back getting the ball on the Eagles, you know they have high touchdown upside. You know they have high carry upside. They might not have a ton of receptions, but it's just a good enough spot with good enough scoring opportunity that I think keep an eye on the practice report. But if those two are playing, Sanders, Scott, you can play both them as running back 2s. For the Jets, Michael Carter is going to miss another week, and so we'll have Tevin Coleman and Ty Johnson again. Remember, Coleman is going to be used more on early downs, Johnson more on 3rd downs, obvious passing situations. This spot, it's fine, but it's really more the quarterback play. As we've talked about the past 2 months with the Jets, it's not as much the matchup, is Zach Wilson the quarterback? Because if Zach Wilson's the quarterback, these running backs are not getting that many targets, and that's what elevates the floor, elevates the ceiling for any backfield. If you're going to have 8 targets, I don't really care what you did on the ground. You're getting a ton of work in the receiving game. If you're only going to have 2 targets, that's not as good, right? And so I think both of them could be used as low-end flex options, but ideally, you're not starting any Jets running back while Zach Wilson's a quarterback unless we have a fantastic matchup. But even in the past, in fantastic matchups like Michael Carter. Michael Carter, when he comes back, is someone I would use. I'm not in love with either of these other 2. Cardinals at Bears. Up next, this game has a 44.5 point total, so a little bit lower, and the Cardinals are 7.5 point road favorites. For the Cardinals, we've got Chase Edmonds going to miss another week. He's probably going to return in week 14, but we will see. You never really know with injuries. That means that James Conner will be close to a feature back once again, and as more than a touchdown favorite, he's a running back 1, even in a negative matchup. And then you're not using Benjamin, right? Benjamin, I think, has talent. Benjamin could be good if they gave him a workload, but they're using James Conner at the goal line. They're using James Conner on a very large number of these plays. Start him. Benjamin's only a 16 or an 18 team league play, and he'd really only be viable if they ended up winning this game by 20. For the Bears, Dave Montgomery has played 85%, 95%, and 84% of the snaps since returning from injury. The fantasy results haven't been there yet, but you're starting a running back getting 15 to 20 touches on, that many snaps, right? Because we know the ceiling is there. If he's going to get around 85, 95% of the snaps, He could have 25 touches. He could have 30 touches if we had a game script where maybe Kyler, because I'm expecting Kyler back this week, maybe Kyler throws a pick six. Maybe they get a defensive touchdown. They find some way to get a lead. You know for a fact the Bears are running the ball a ton if they can get a lead. And so you could see a second half. If the Bears are, up in this game, that it's just Montgomery over and over and over again, he can approach 30 touches. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to lose. That's what Vegas is projecting. But he's still going to get plenty of touches. Still going to be someone you want to use. And then Khalil Herbert, he's talented, but he's got 9 carries and 0 targets since Montgomery came back, so you can't use him in any format. Next up, we've got the Vikings at the Lions. This game has a fairly average 46.5 point total, and the Vikings are 7-point road favorites. For the Vikings, Dalvin Cook is out, so Alexander Mattison is expected to be the featured back. They could mix in Nwangwu, hopefully I'm saying that right, especially on some screen passes because he's very, very athletic. He's someone that want to get the ball, but he's not really someone that want to just line up, and give 10 carries and 2 targets to, right? They want to be creative in how they get him the ball, so I'm expecting him to be very efficient on the touches he gets, but not to get that many. So that's still a good thing for Madison, right? He's not going to be being siphoned away, like 15 touches in this game. It's only going to be a handful. It's going to be designed looks. Madison's still going to be very likely the goal line back and then very likely get close to 20 touches, honestly. So you're starting him as a high-end running back 1. And Nwangwu, he's going to get some touches. If you're in like a 16-team league, he's fine to use. I added him in my 14-team league, and he will be on the bench. I'm still not playing him. We'll see what happens, though, this week. For the Lions, Swift expected to be out again, or I guess remain out because he left last week early with the shoulder injury. So we should get Jamal Williams as close to a feature back. The matchup isn't as good as it is for Madison, obviously, right? Like, obviously, the Lions have a much weaker defense than the Vikings. But Williams is going to be used in every aspect of the game. He'll have a chance at scoring. He'll be used on the ground. He'll have plenty of receptions. And so I think you're starting him as a high-end running back, too. They do have some other backs that they want to mix in that they will give touches to, but Williams will get plenty of touches to be worth starting, and then those other guys won't mix in enough to be worth it outside of like very, very deep formats and like not even 14-team league. You've got to be at least in a 16-team league. Giants at Dolphins up next. This game has a very low 40.5 point total, and the Dolphins are 4-point home favorites. For the Giants, Barkley saw his snap share increase from 62% to 87% last week, and his touches increased from 12 to 17. He might not have the same touch ceiling that he used to have. Like, I don't think he's going to go out there and have like 25 to 30 touches. This is also, a tough matchup. He's a road underdog against a Dolphins defense that ranks pretty above average in every single run defense metric, but it doesn't matter. If he's going to have 85-90% of the snaps, he'll mix in some targets. He'll be the best chance of scoring that they have, and he'll be good enough where you're starting him and you're not starting any other Giants running back. For the Dolphins, we're likely to see a committee again. Gaskin is still the lead and the only one that you would want, but it's obviously not ideal. I still have Gaskin projected for 11.8 PPR points, or half PPR points, half PPR points. He's a little bit better in full PPR because he's like relatively involved in the receiving game. But it's just a low end too, right? If they're going to have other running backs mixing in, taking work away, the Dolphins don't have a good enough team, a good enough offense for him to just be a slam dunk. With that being said, he's checking a lot of boxes this week. Home favorite, even though their offensive line is bad, like the Giants rank 31st in rush defense DVOA, 26th in yards per carry allowed, and giving up the 7th most schedule adjusted fantasy points to running backs. So even if your line is terrible, well, if their line also is, it's not as bad, right? So really good spot for Gaskin. I think you're starting him just because they're mixing in other backs. He's more just a running back 2 for me. Next up, we've got Bucks at Falcons. This game has a high 50.5 point total, and the Bucks are 11-point road favorites. For the Bucks, keep starting Leonard Fournette and no one else. For the Falcons, keep starting Cordero Patterson and no one else. Pretty easy game to break down. And then we have another one that's very easy to break down now. Chargers at Bengals, another 50.5 point total. Bengals 3-point home favorites. And you know what to do. You're always starting Austin Eckler. You're always starting Joe Mixon. You're not starting any other running back for either team in this game. Colts at Texans. Up next, this game has a 45.5 point total, and the Colts are 9-point road favorites. For those Colts, obviously start Jonathan Taylor. Then Hines isn't the worst play, especially if Matt continues to be inactive, because if they only have 2 running backs, he's still going to mix in sometimes. But Jonathan Taylor has been on absolute dominant run. He's going to get the vast majority of the touches, and the Colts are probably going to need to either be trailing, which is unlikely, or win by multiple scores, which is still difficult to do for Hines to be viable here, right? And just remember that his floor is super low. In their last meeting, the Colts won, I believe it was 31-3. Hines had 4 carries and 1 reception. So they won by 28 points, still only 5 touches from Raheem Hines. And they've won 3 of their last 4. Hines is averaging barely over 3 carries, barely over 2 receptions per game. I have him as running back 36 half PPR, 34 full PPR. So in a deeper format, you could use him as a lower end flex play, maybe a second flex play. But understand that even if they crush it, he's probably not going to do all that much unless he happens to score a touchdown on his limited touches. So I'd still prefer to keep him on the bench, any format. For the Texans, Burkhead and David Johnson should rotate in, each getting around 8 to 12 touches. I believe David Johnson has an illness. They've had an illness just running through the entire organization. A lot of people missing practice on Wednesday because of it. But if you're having an illness and you're missing practice on Wednesday and it's a non-COVID illness, you're probably going to be good to go on Sunday, right? You have enough time to recover. So I'm imagining Burkhead and David Johnson will be totally fine here. The Colts have an elite run defense. The Texans have an awful offensive line. And so both these guys, again, they're going to see touches. And a lot of players getting around 8 to 12 touches with a little work in the receiving game might be viable. Not on the Texans. I really don't think either of them are going to crack the top 30, and I prefer to play neither of them. Kicking out the 4 o'clock games, we've got Jaguars at Rams. This game has a slightly above average 47.5 point total, and the Rams are massive 12.5 point home favorites. I believe that's the largest favorite of the week. It also gives them the second highest implied total. So yes, they're a huge favorite, but they also are projected to score the second most points behind the Bucks this week. So a lot of points probably going to be scored by the Rams. For the Jaguars, James Robinson has averaged just under 14 carries and about 3 receptions per game over the last 3 weeks. They are inexcusably mixing in Carlos Hyde, but they're mixing him in for snaps, not really touches. So even though he's having a much higher snap share than he should be, they're not really using him when he's in there. And when they bring James Robinson back in, they use him. So that's still fine. You don't need him to get 80% of the snaps if he's getting the vast majority of the touches, right? Volume, pretty solid. I think you're playing Robinson as a running back 2 in any matchup. Obviously, this isn't a fantastic one, especially because they're not projected to score very many points. And the offense is just bad in general. But again, getting, like I said, almost 14 carries, 3 receptions, that's good enough volume. And he's talented enough to where they're going to use him in any game script, right? He's one of their best players. They fall behind, he'll get receptions. Well, let's be honest, they're not going to be ahead. But he's probably going to mix in 15, 17 touches. He's going to be good enough. You're starting him as running back 2. For the Rams, depends on the final status of Henderson. He was a DNP on Wednesday, and he definitely might not play this week, but McVay seems to think that he will. Pretty easy breakdown either way, though. Start him if he's active, start Sony if he's out. The Jaguars do have a stronger run defense than pass defense, but they're not even close to elite at either, and it doesn't matter all that much. When you're favored by 2 touchdowns or nearly 2 touchdowns, and you have the second highest implied total of the week, it doesn't really matter what the run defense is on the other side. Start whoever the starting running back is for that team. And if Henderson's active, I'm assuming he's good to go, and I really still don't think when Henderson starts, you can start Sony. Next up, we've got football team at the Raiders. This game has another high 50-point total, and the Raiders are 2.5 point home favorites for the football team. McKissick was carted off last week with a head injury, hasn't practiced yet with a concussion. I can't imagine he'll play, but obviously that status is going to impact Antonio Gibson. If he is out, then Gibson is a phenomenal play. He handled 29 carries and 7 receptions last week and are up to 146 total yards on those 36 touches. The Raiders have a stronger pass defense than run defense, and they've given up the 4th most scheduled adjusted fantasy points to opposing running backs. So you are starting Antonio Gibson, I would say regardless, but he's probably going to go nuclear if McKissick is out, which is a nice sign for Gibson owners. Been waiting for this all season. He could honestly have a dominant run to close the season if he is finally healthy and they're going to use him this much. he could have a really, really nice finish, could win some people the championship. For the Raiders, over the last 4 weeks, they've lost 3 or 4, so not great. But Jacobs has shown a higher floor than usual in those losses. He had 22 carries and 2 receptions in their win last week. But even in these losses before that, he almost had 10 carries per game, averaging 4.67 receptions in these losses. So they're projected to be like losing, but it should be close. So I would say he's probably going to have, at least 17 touches in that like 16, 17 touch range as a floor with more receptions if they're trailing, which is not something we used to be able to say, or something we used to be able to say in the past. So given that it also comes with touchdown upside, I think you're playing him in this spot. It's not a fantastic matchup, but the touches are there, the talent is there, the opportunity's there, and with Waller missing, with Ruggs out, like they don't have that many good players left in the offense, they're probably going to lean on Jacobs, and so I would be playing him this week. Next up, 49ers at Seahawks. This game has a average 46-point total. 49ers are 3.5-point road favorites. For the 49ers, Seahawks are a phenomenal matchup for opposing running backs, and Elijah Mitchell is clearly their best running back, and they clearly know that, and they're giving him a ton of touches. You are absolutely starting him and no one else. For the Seahawks, I don't think you need to start any of them. Like, Collins is their lead back, but that only results in like 7 to 10 carries and maybe a reception if he's lucky, and a pretty low chance of scoring a touchdown, if we're being honest. So I would just avoid that backfield entirely until someone starts getting like 12 to 14 consistent touches a week. I wouldn't start anyone. Ravens at Steelers up next. This game has a pretty low 44-point total, and the Ravens are 4.5-point road favorites. For the Ravens, Freeman is the only running back I'd consider. Murray is good for around 10 touches a week, but most of that's going to come on the ground, and it does seem like he's going to remain their running back 2. And even Freeman, honestly, like he's fine as a lower-end option. You can use him as running back 2. Should get around 14 to 17 touches, is a better chance for receptions, but the reception ceiling is not really there. And even the touchdown ceiling, it's not that high. He only has 4 touchdowns on the year, and Lamar's going to take some both on the ground and through the air. So with a player that doesn't have a super high touchdown ceiling, it's not a phenomenal matchup. It's not like they have a super high implied team total, since the total of the game is low. Even though Baltimore's projected to win, their projected points as a team isn't that high. Like, Freeman's just not that good of a play, but he's probably going to be fine. He's probably going to be someone you put in there. He gets you like 10, 11, 12 points, somewhere in that range, and you're like, well, it didn't sink me because he was still getting some touches, but it wasn't that great. He's going to need a touchdown to be like fine, and who knows really if he's going to score a touchdown. I just think he's like a neutral play. Low end too. For the Steelers, pretty easy. Always start Najee Harris, not starting any other running backs. Sunday night game is going to be Broncos at Chiefs. This game has a 47-point total, and the Chiefs are 9.5-point home favorites coming off of their bye. For the Broncos, Williams has played 57% and 58% of the snaps over the last 2 weeks, but he still hasn't been able to separate from Melvin Gordon. Talent-wise, he has. When you watch these two running backs play, Williams is the more talented. He's been more productive, more efficient. But for the coaching staff, it seems like they want to keep the 60-40 split moving forward, at least in the snaps, and you'd have to think the touches will, over a larger sample, kind of equate to that. I still think to close the season, he can approach, 75% of the snaps in some of these games, but I don't know if that's going to happen this week, and so I still prefer Williams over Gordon, but both of them are just low-end running back 2s. It's not a great spot, massive road underdogs, projected to score less than 19 points against a Chiefs team coming off of their bye. So again, both are fine, prefer Williams, but both only low-end 2s. I don't expect either of them to go off. The Monday night game is going to be Patriots at Bills. This one has a very low 43-point total, and the Bills are 3-point home favorites. For the Patriots, expect the same split we've seen the past 2 weeks. You got Harris starting the game, getting the first drive, Stevenson alternating drives after that, Bolden being used on third downs and 2-minute drills. Unfortunately, in one of the most difficult possible matchups on the road against the Bills, 4th in rush defense TVOA, 6th in yards per carry allowed, giving up the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs in terms of schedule adjusted fantasy points. It's not a good spot, right? It's a very, very bad spot for the running backs, especially if they're going to continue this rotation. Again, starting with Harris, and then every other drive mixes between Stevenson and Harris. Then you would expect Harris to start the second half, and so you end up with a situation where Harris has probably one more drive started. But who knows? Maybe they start shifting more workload to Stevenson, but regardless, they're probably going to split. And in a bad matchup, both of them are fine as low end flex plays. And that the edge does go to Harris, but it's barely, and they're both not fantastic plays. I would prefer to bench both. Unfortunately, I'm in a situation where I have to play Stevenson in 2 leagues because I've got Kamara, I've got A.J. Dillon on bye, I've got Chase Edmonds, and so it's tough, right? I know there's a ton of higher end injuries this season, and so you might be forced to start one of these 2, and so it's fine. I still think the Patriots can be competitive. I still think the Patriots can win this game. And you know that if they get up, they're going to have to lean on the ground game because, it's a very difficult environment. You don't want to have Mac Jones go out there and just air the ball out every play, especially if you're up. You want to play more conservative, and so they're still going to use these running backs. And they have a good enough offensive line. They're talented enough to still perform well. So you can start them. Just understand it's not a good spot, and they're probably not going to play all that well. For the Bills, Moss is probably going to be inactive again, but we don't know that. So that's one risk here, is that if you go into this assuming that Zach Moss is inactive again and that you've got Singletary and Breida both being like fine flex plays, that's fine. But if Moss becomes active, you can't play anyone, right? None of them are going to be good plays. They'll all get like 30% of the snaps, 30% of touches, and none of them are going to be all that good in what is still a difficult matchup against the Patriots. So know that that's a risk. But know that I'm also still expecting Moss to be inactive. And if that is the case, you could play Singletary and Breida as like flex plays, but honestly, neither of them being all that fantastic. So that is my breakdown of every backfield this week. Remember, you can see my exact rankings and projections under every scoring format by just looking at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? But thanks for watching.